For years, Emily Bennett had been living under her mother's strict control, a control so absolute that the court was convinced her father, Daniel, was unfit. Yet behind closed doors, the reality was entirely different: neglect, hidden bruises, and silent cries for help. In a courtroom shrouded in deception, uncovering the truth proves no easy task. Will Emily find the courage to speak up before it's too late? And before we continue, please share with us where you're listening from today. The towering courthouse loomed as Emily stepped out of the car, nervously twisting the hem of her oversized sweater. Her mother, Laura Bennett, led the way, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Today, Laura was convinced that victory was hers. Just as it had been 3 years ago when Daniel Carter, Emily's father, had been stripped of his parental rights. But something felt different this time. Emily sensed it deep in her bones. The crisp air carried not only the weight of the past, but also the tension of what was about to occur. As they neared the entrance, a man in a neatly pressed suit greeted them. Richard Hayes, Laura's lawyer, leaned in and murmured, "Stick to the plan. Remember, Emily's worsening condition is due to leukemia, not neglect," Laura snapped with an eye roll. "I know, Richard." Her irritation only grew when a security officer confiscated the flask she had carelessly left in her bag. Her face flushed with embarrassment, yet she pressed forward, determined to preserve her carefully constructed image. Meanwhile, across the hallway, Emily's heart skipped a beat as she spotted her father standing in a navy blue suit. Daniel Carter looked every bit the father Emily had longed for. His dark eyes softened as soon as they met hers, and for the first time in months, a tentative warmth spread through her chest. With a small wave and a smile tugging at his lips, Daniel mirrored her gesture. So engrossed in that moment was he that her mother barely noticed when, drawn by an unseen force, Emily stepped toward him. The moment she reached him, Daniel knelt with arms wide open. Without hesitation, Emily ran into his embrace, her tears dampening the fabric of his suit. "I miss you, Dad," she whispered. "I miss you more, sweetheart," he replied softly. "Are you okay?" Before she could answer, a sharp voice cut through the tender moment. "Stay away from her." Laura's fury was palpable as she yanked Emily back, her grip tightening around the girl's wrist. "You have no right." Jonathan held his ground, his expression calm, yet resolute. "We'll see about that." Inside the courtroom, tension hung heavily in the air. Judge Henry Calloway took his seat and declared, "We are here today in the matter of Carter versus Bennett. The purpose of these proceedings is to determine what is in the best interest of the child." Both lawyers began their opening statements. Olivia Grant, representing Daniel, spoke first. "Your Honor, this case is about far more than just custody. It is a matter of safety and well-being. Emily has endured persistent neglect from her custodial parent. We will provide concrete evidence in the form of financial records, medical documentation, and first-hand testimony to prove that Laura Bennett is unfit to care for her daughter." Richard swiftly rose to counter, his voice steady yet firm. "Your Honor, we acknowledge that parenting a chronically ill child is an immense challenge. While my client may not have been perfect, imperfection does not equate to unfitness. She has done the best she could under difficult financial and emotional circumstances. To separate a child from her mother over human mistakes would be an injustice." Olivia stepped forward, unwavering. "Human mistakes do not explain financial records showing that Laura squandered thousands in child support on luxury vacations while Emily's medical bills went unpaid. Is that the best a mother can do?" Richard narrowed his eyes. "We must not overlook the emotional distress my client has faced. As a single mother, she struggled emotionally and financially. The opposition paints her as a villain, but what single parent hasn't had difficulties managing resources?" The jury exchanged glances, the weight of the argument pressing on them. Olivia continued, her voice unwavering. "Struggling is one thing, Your Honor, but knowingly abandoning her responsibilities while prioritizing self-indulgence is another. And we have witness testimony to prove it. A private investigator then presented footage showing Laura at bars during times when she should have been at Emily's hospital visits. Following that, testimony silenced the courtroom. Emily recounted her severe neglect. Maria Turner, her court-appointed advocate, testified that Emily had been left alone for long periods and endured both verbal and physical abuse. At that moment, Laura's posture stiffened as she shot a glare at Emily that sent shivers down the girl's spine. During a break, Laura dragged Emily into a restroom, her grip on the girl's wrist painfully tight. The door slammed shut behind them, and under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, Laura's furious face was cast in deep shadows. "Don't you dare say another word," she hissed, the scent of a cigarette she'd snuck outside lingering on her breath. "If you do, I'll make sure you never see him again." Emily trembled, her heart pounding. "Mom, please, no," she pleaded. Laura cut her off, stepping forward until she loomed over her daughter. "You think he cares about you? He just wants to hurt me. You mean nothing to him, and if you make me look bad, you'll regret it." Though tears welled in Emily's eyes, she bit her lip to hold them back. Grabbing her chin roughly to force her to look up, Laura commanded, "You'd better smile when we go back in there. Act normal. If anyone asks, say you tripped and fell." Emily nodded quickly, her body shaking. "Say it," Laura demanded. "I tripped and fell," Emily whispered. A smirk crossed Laura's face as she released her. "Good girl. Now fix your face. We have a courtroom to return to." When proceedings resumed, Judge Calloway turned to Emily. "I'd like to hear from you now." The words echoed in her ears, making her stomach churn. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrest of the witness stand. The weight of years of silence threatened to crush her, yet across the courtroom, her father's warm, steady gaze met hers. He gave a small nod, silent reassurance that she wasn't alone. Her breath hitched as she glanced at her mother, whose cold, piercing stare drilled into her. Fear clawed at her chest. Would speaking the truth set her free, or would it trap her forever? She had spent years suppressing her cries, convincing herself that the bruises, the loneliness, the pain were just parts of life. But not anymore. With a deep, shaky inhale, Emily reached up and removed her wig. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom as the bruises along her scalp were laid bare. Some were old, faded yellow and brown, but others were fresh, angry shades of blue and purple. The silence was deafening, save for the sound of Laura Bennett's sharp intake of breath. Emily's voice quivered, but she found strength in the moment. "Mom drinks a lot," she started, her words soft but deliberate. "When she does, she forgets things, like my medicine. She locks it away so I can't reach it. And when she's upset, she throws things. She yells. Sometimes she—" Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "Sometimes she hurts me." Her mother shot up from her seat. "That's a lie," she spat. "She's lying to turn you all against me." The gavel struck sharply. "Order in the court, Miss Bennett. Sit down immediately," Judge Calloway commanded, his voice firm. Emily squeezed her hands into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had to be brave. She had to finish what she started. "There were nights when I was so weak I could barely walk. I crawled to the kitchen, hoping, praying, that she forgot to lock the cabinet. But it was always locked. I begged her to help me, but she told me to stop being dramatic, that I was being a burden." Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back. "I don't want to go home with her." She paused, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. "There were times I went days without my medicine. I felt terribly sick, but I couldn't tell anyone because she said it would make us both look bad. She blamed me for stressing her out." Desperation shone in her eyes as she pleaded with the judge. "Please don't make me go back there." "Laura, shut up. Lies," she shrieked. "She's lying." The judge's gavel then struck sharply against the desk. "Sit down, Miss Bennett," commanded Judge Calloway. Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks as she continued. "She hit me earlier during the break. She threatened me." Lowering her voice to a whisper, she added, "I don't want to go home with her. I want to live with my dad." The courtroom fell silent. Rebecca, Daniel's lawyer, then stood. "Your Honor, given Emily's testimony and the overwhelming evidence, we request an immediate transfer of custody." Even Richard's voice, as he suggested counseling, lacked conviction. He knew the case was lost. After a long pause, Judge Calloway spoke. "The court finds that Laura Bennett has engaged in neglect and abuse. Custody of Emily Carter is awarded to her father, Daniel Carter, effective immediately." A cry of relief escaped Daniel as he rushed forward to embrace his daughter. Emily clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder. her body trembling under the weight of the moment. She gripped his suit as if afraid that letting go would make the moment vanish. Daniel gently stroked her hair, whispering, "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're safe." Across the room, Laura's face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this," she screamed, a roar of rage and desperation. She thrashed against the officers restraining her, her shrieks echoing through the courtroom. "This isn't over. Do you hear me?" Emily barely heard her mother's words, as the pounding of her heart, the warmth of her father's embrace, and the overwhelming relief drowned everything else out. For the first time in years, she felt secure. Daniel pulled back slightly to brush the tears from her cheeks. "You are so brave, Emily. I'm so proud of you," he said. With trembling lips, she whispered, "I was so scared." "I know," he murmured, holding her close once more. "But you'll never have to be scared again." Rebecca, Daniel's lawyer, stepped forward with a reassuring smile. "You did the right thing today." Emily nodded, sniffling, still trembling from the ordeal, yet gradually feeling lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. As officers escorted Laura out of the room, her screams faded into the distance, no longer able to grip Emily's soul. With her eyes closed, she sank into the safety of her father's embrace. At last, the nightmare was over. In the days that followed, Emily settled into her father's home, a place where the walls were decorated with photos of happier times, and where she felt as though a great weight had been lifted. One evening, as she sat beside Daniel near the pool, he signed to her in their secret language. "I love you, my girl," he signed. She smiled and signed back, "I love you too, Dad." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed that everything would be okay. As the judge's gavel echoed once more, the decision was final. Emily would no longer have to suffer in silence. Justice had been served, and she was finally safe in her father's arms, far from the pain and neglect that had haunted her for so long. Yet, while her battle has ended, many children continue to face similar struggles, their voices unheard, their truths hidden beneath layers of deception and fear. What are your thoughts on Emily's story? If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Would you have had the strength to speak out like Emily, or would the trauma and fear of being bullied into silence have been too overwhelming? Stories like Emily's remind us of the importance of listening, believing, and acting when it matters most. Let us know your thoughts. The conversation does not end here. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next video.